In the realm of emotional connections, join me as we discover the true essence of intimacy and vulnerability in relationships. Recently, my aunt decided to retire from her role at a medium-sized company, passing the reins to my cousin. Strangely, one of her initial actions was to forego renewing my contract with the company. Instead, she extended job offers to her circle of friends and immediate family, excluding me. This left me vexed, particularly since I had consistently met my performance targets, while those she brought in did not fare as well in terms of their performance. Upon confronting her, she cited evolving changes under her leadership and regretfully stated that my services were no longer necessary. Although I was incensed, I reluctantly accepted the situation and began my hunt for new job opportunities. Ultimately, I was approached by a competing company which enticed me with a generous compensation package. Over the course of 3 years with this new firm, I have ascended 2 positions and am progressively becoming more involved in managerial responsibilities. Meanwhile, my cousin's enterprise faced challenges, and during a family gathering, she implored me to return in order to help salvage the company. I declined her request, resulting in heated debates among family members. Accusations were hurled my way, insinuating that my refusal demonstrated a lack of concern for family matters and an excessive focus on monetary gains. In response, I posed a valid query. What assurance did I have that I wouldn't be cast aside once the company regained stability? Regrettably, this exchange further intensified conflicts, resulting in a deep rift between my family and my cousins. Thus, I find myself inquiring whether it is unreasonable for me to withhold assistance from my cousin's company after being excluded in the first instance. On a personal note, my wife and I recently celebrated our marriage last month. Our initial encounter occurred years ago at a celebratory event she hosted for our nuptials. Being young and spirited, we're envisioning our wedding as a lively affair. Our invitations clearly communicated that the event would not be suitable for children under the age of 18. While teenagers were considered, it was stipulated that their attendance would be subject to parental discretion. The wedding night was indeed a splendid occasion, but midway through, my father discreetly informed me that my uncle had been making unfavorable remarks about me to some of our close relatives. Preferring not to ignite any tensions during my own wedding, I brushed off the incident. Subsequently, I took a group photograph alongside my siblings and cousins, encompassing both male and female relatives. We had a close-knit upbringing, and it was unimaginable for me to have my wedding without their presence. Back in the day, we used to sneak drinks together at my cottage, evoking fond memories. My parents, along with my aunt, who is the mother of my 2 female cousins, were okay with the idea of them having a drink at the wedding. However, they did have a conversation with them beforehand. Shortly afterward, my uncle confronted me about the alcohol consumption. He criticized me loudly for permitting his son Jackson, my 1-year-old cousin mentioned earlier, to attend what he deemed an inappropriate event. He expressed his view that I was being immature and irresponsible for allowing an underage individual to access alcohol. I retorted that it wasn't my responsibility and pointed out that he should have addressed the matter with Jackson before bringing him to the wedding. I reminded him that the invitations had issued a warning and that it was his own decision to bring Jackson along. He justified his decision, stating he thought it would be fine since my brothers and other cousins were also present. He cautioned me that I would come to regret the entire evening once I grew up and ceased behaving childishly. In the months that followed, my uncle remained distant, choosing not to communicate with me. My father, while not agreeing with my uncle's stance, was displeased with how I handled the situation. He believed I bore some responsibility. Do I deserve blame for this situation? I don't personally consider it a significant issue. Many teenagers try alcohol at some point. I didn't appreciate relying on my parents for alcohol throughout high school, and I realized that if I were in a dire situation, I wouldn't have anyone to turn to for help. I think it's beneficial for Jackson to understand that he's surrounded by accepting individuals, so he can avoid similar predicaments. While I acknowledge that I'm not Jackson's parent, I believe my uncle should have addressed the topic of alcohol with Jackson beforehand, rather than placing the onus on me to set those boundaries. To clarify, the country doesn't have a legal drinking age, and Jackson has consumed alcohol before. Presumably, my father would have intervened if there were restrictions on his drinking. I want to emphasize that I didn't provide the alcohol voluntarily. They approached me and asked for my involvement. At no point during the night did I serve or sell alcohol. We shared nearly a decade and a half together and are proud parents of 3 children. The bonds we built are unbreakable, unaffected by mere disagreements over your artistic pursuits. I'm a woman in my 40s and my spouse, a man in his 50s, crossed paths when he proposed before his deployment. Following his return from Afghanistan, we swiftly united in marriage. Initially, everything was harmonious. However, a gradual escalation of rudeness from his mother and sister cast shadows over our lives. Our relationship thrives with contentment, financial autonomy, and minimal conflicts. Our faith is strong, and we cherish our roles as parents. My husband consistently displays affection and conveys his emotions openly. Strangely, these positive aspects seem to perturb his mother and sister. They insinuated that I was overly dependent and insecure due to our shared time. Their unwelcome advice and intrusive behavior crossed boundaries, even belittling me when I set limits. Accusations of insecurity arose. The situation worsened, culminating in his younger sister asserting that he contacted me excessively and her insufficiently. She questioned his defiance of me against them, emphasizing their familial bond over my comparatively brief connection. During a summer encounter, his mother and sister orchestrated a family meeting outdoors. Stepping onto the veranda, his sister's declaration stung. "This isn't about you. Step away." Feeling uncomfortable, I confided in my husband, expressing my desire to depart. After hours of dialogue, an anonymous letter arrived, accusing us of being repulsive together. The letter wished for him to discover a younger woman, despite my being 9 years his senior, devoid of any manipulative tendencies. Sharing the letter with my husband, he confronted his family, only to face accusations that I orchestrated it to stir turmoil. Disheartened, he distanced himself from them for several years. Meanwhile, passive-aggressive Facebook posts continued, vilifying me as a promiscuous traitor with claims that the truth would eventually emerge. In a bid to address this toxicity, my husband conversed with his father, learning that these allegations had propagated within the family. Doubts concerning the paternity of our son circulated, even leading to public jest from my relatives. Undertaking a DNA test, we conclusively proved his parentage and shared the results widely. The saga continues, but we remain resolute in our love and family unit, weathering these storms with strength and unity. His mother contacted us and conveyed that I had allegedly initiated the rumor myself by casually mentioning our son's blonde hair on a previous occasion. Adding to the complexity, his sister questioned the validity of a DNA test, linking it to baseless suspicions of my sexual orientation, implying that I was involved with other women. I assure you, these details are not fabricated. Attempting to divert blame, his mother initially tried to attribute the rumors solely to his sister. However, subsequent discovery of incriminating text messages on her phone exposed her as the true instigator. These messages propagated false claims that our son wasn't truly part of the family and accused me of maliciously attempting to take her son away. In response, my partner severed ties with his mother, completely cutting her out of his life. His sister remains distant and uncommunicative. They assert that he has been manipulated and transformed, and they wish to disassociate themselves from him. Regrettably, they contend that I'm the one responsible for fracturing the family unit. In my perspective, my husband invested only minimal effort in maintaining his relationship with them. He rarely initiated calls, texts, or reached out, even after being promoted. I consistently prompted him to connect with his mother, yet ended up initiating contact more frequently than he did. Their perception of my involvement might have been skewed due to the geographical distance between us. Unfortunately, this distance inadvertently contributed to the illusion that I was gatekeeping access to him. I assure you, this was never my intention. I enthusiastically organized holiday visits to foster connections, especially since I had initially looked forward to building a bond with his sister. The outcome has left me disappointed and plagued by guilt, but I'm at a loss as to what I could have done differently. Strangely, even his mother reluctantly acknowledged that she had seen him more often after our relationship began. The situation is undeniably complex and emotionally charged, and I'm left grappling with the turmoil it has caused.